Hi there, and welcome to A Journey to Milk and Honey. Thank you all for joining me today. Before we get started, I've got to tell y'all something, and that is this. I promise, I vow, I pinky promise that this will be the longest podcast episode that you will ever hear from me. Ever. So today I'm going to be chatting with an Orthodox rabbi, a rabbi who I actually just met. And I want to preface this episode with the following. My podcast is not necessarily a political podcast per se, or even a Jewish political podcast per se. However, we do have a very important election coming very soon here in the United States. And I think that it's important for us, that we essentially do not ignore it here. And so, because this is my podcast and I can do whatever I want to, as I frequently say, I'm going there. Because what has been going on since October 7th, 2023, the massacre of 1,200 human beings and the kidnapping of 250 more Israelis cannot be ignored this election, in my humble opinion. And add to that the incredible amount of Jew hatred that is rampant on our college campuses and across our nation and across the globe. Because in my humble opinion, whoever we put in that White House, must stand strong with Israel and, by association, with the Jewish people. And so there you have it as to why I'm going there. And with that said, as I mentioned already, I'm going to be chatting with an Orthodox rabbi. And the reason that I'm going to be chatting with an Orthodox rabbi, I will explain to you later. Or it may just become obvious to you as well. So I'll be right back with my very special guest for today, Rabbi Yaakov Menken.
My name is Liz Gabert, and my story begins in the Baptist Bible Belt of West Texas. I married a Catholic man, and together we raised 3 children internationally. Through my travels and experiences, my Jewish faith became secondary to everyday life. Now, after some incredibly powerful events that transpired recently, I'm at a place and time in my life to delve into my Jewish faith. I invite you to join me on this journey where I and an amazing array of weekly guests will enlighten you about the faith, people, and innovations that have shaped Israel and the Jewish people's rich history. Welcome to A Journey to Milk and Honey.
Hey there, just a quick reminder before we get started. If you want to connect with us, we're on all major social media platforms at JMH Podcast. And you can find us on YouTube at JMH Podcast or A Journey to Milk and Honey. You can also find us online at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com or jmhpodcast.com. Oh, and if you enjoy what we do here at A Journey to Milk and Honey, you can help support us by liking, subscribing, or leaving us reviews wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for joining me. And now I want to introduce y'all to Rabbi Yaakov Menken. Rabbi Menken is the founder and current managing director and the chief executive officer of Coalition for Jewish Values, which is an organization representing over 2,500 traditional Orthodox rabbis in American public policy. His writing has appeared in Fox News, Newsweek, The Federalist, the Jerusalem Post, and other mainstream and Jewish outlets. He is also the director of Project Genesis, operator of Torah.org, and other leading internet resources for Jewish outreach and education. He co-founded and for decades served as co-editor of Cross Currents, an online journal of Orthodox Jewish thought and opinion, and is the author of the Everything Torah book, an introduction to basic Judaism and Torah thought, which I need to order right now. Rabbi Menken earned a BSc in computer science from Princeton University before pursuing rabbinic studies at yeshivas, which are traditional rabbinical seminaries in both Israel and the United States. Well, Rabbi Menken, thank you so much for joining me today. This is just an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate it so much that you jumped in so last minute with me.
Well, thank you for having me. Glad to do it.
Okay. So before we get started, I want to mention that I have since for about the last 6 months, a Torah partner. There's an organization called Partners in Torah. Do you know of them?
Sure.
Okay. And so my current Torah partner, his name is Mark Powers.
Oh, Mark Powers of Jews for Judaism.
Yes. You know
I know. Yeah, of course I know Mark Powers.
He told me to tell you hello.
Well, I definitely say hello back. That's going back a long ways. Before my involvement with Coalition for Jewish Values, you know that I created Torah.org. Project Genesis is that organization. And we do, teaching Judaism online. And so, of course, we were interacting with organizations like Mark's, like Jews for Judaism. And yeah, it was a pleasure.
There you go.
It brings back good memory. Isn't he in like Lancaster, PA or something like that?
Well, he was, but now he made Aliyah. He's been in Israel, in Ashkelon now for 5 years.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
maybe I heard he was moving. I know several people who used to work at Jews for Judaism have made Aliyah, but it's all a process. Everybody's individual journey. So I didn't realize he had gone.
Absolutely. Anyway, I'm supposed to tell you from him hello, so I did my job. So we can move ahead. So, all right. Well, Rabbi Menken, what we want to do here real quickly is we do want to ask you a little bit about yourself, but more specifically about the organization I believe you founded. And this organization is not that old, but it's called the Coalition for Jewish Values. And we can find that at coalitionforjewishvalues.org, right?
That's right.
And so my question to you relative to that is, who are y'all? What are you all about? What's your mission? And how do you go about achieving your goals?
So there was a lot of questions in that question. That's very good. Coalition for Jewish Values actually came about because of a discussion several other rabbis were having right at the beginning of the Trump administration. Jewish leftists were saying any number of things that offended American conservatives overall on a whole series of topics, but then especially as pertained to President Trump. Oh, it's so anti-Semitic, and Gorka's an anti-Semite, and Bannon's an anti-Semite, just one after the other after the next. And at a certain point, these other rabbis were having a conversation like, what do we do to counter and show that there really are people with traditional values and support and uphold them, and also don't bandy about anti-Semitism falsely? When you sound the alarm when the danger is not real, you won't be believed when the danger is real. It's the boy who cried wolf syndrome. And one of them, who is an associate of mine from several other projects, reached out to me about this conversation and said, what is my opinion of what we should do? And my foolish response was, well, if you want to have credibility, you have to form a group. It has to have a name. And I say that foolishly because the response of the other people involved was, oh, great, you can be the director. Of this new unfunded project. And that's how Coalition for Jewish Values came to be. And you see that we have several officers, nationally respected people who are behind this. And I'm the chief clerk and bottle washer who really gets the main work done.
Okay.
But it's all because of their seniority and their credibility that I'm able to do it and have an impact. And we're the largest rabbinic public policy organization in the country. We represent over 2,500 rabbis. It's actually even considerably more than that. But really, the things that we say as an organization, not any of our individual op-eds for sure, but when the organization makes a statement, you're listening to the consensus of the Orthodox Jewish community and the Orthodox Jewish rabbinate.
Okay. And you have, how many rabbis are affiliated with your organization?
So as I said, it's over 2,500
Wow.
that we represent. But that's even just the formal number, as it were. I like to joke that we represent 20,000 rabbis who haven't heard of us yet, but all of whom agree with our basic positions and goals, because we only get involved in something as an organization if we know that Torah scholarship directs us in one particular direction. We're not the coalition of Jewish values. We do not claim to be the great oracle sitting on the hill being the authority. The authority, you commented, because we're seeing each other on video, and your listeners will have to believe me that there's a wall full of books behind me, all written in Hebrew and Aramaic and traditional rabbinic scholarship, all of which lead us in particular directions. But obviously, you can open up the Torah, the 5 books of Moses are the first 5 books of the Bible. You open it up, and in the first paragraphs, you know how many genders there are. You know what a marriage looks like. You know the value of a human life and where it comes from. All of these things which are debated in public policy are actually things to which the Bible has a pretty serious and obvious answer. And so if your values are driven by the Bible, you're going to lean in a particular way. And not coincidentally, a lot of traditional Christians have very similar views to our own. May not be identical, but certainly we're in a very similar direction on, at least as far as the public policy goals are concerned. And it's just a relief to all of them to have a Jewish voice involved in this fight as well, because otherwise the left will claim, for example, if you are pro-life, if you don't believe that murdering a baby is of no consequence, then, well, that's a Christian position and it's a church-state violation. And no, it's not. I don't go to church. We recognize that that is problematic also. And so and obviously there's a whole series of things where if you derive your values from Torah, from the 5 books of Moses, you're going to have a particular position. And that's why I can make that joke about representing thousands of rabbis who never heard of us.
Sure, that makes complete sense. So we can wrap this part of it up real quickly. But when I first moved to New Hampshire, and folks know I did this conservative radio talk show, the issue of abortion came across my desk, right? And I jumped on it and I'm going, let me see if I can find a Jewish organization that is pro-life in America. And I'm going to tell you, there is one. But, there's 2.
There are 2.
There are 2?
Go ahead. Which is the one you found?
I'm not going to remember it. It's a Jewish pro-life organization. Her name...
Ashley Routman. You practically, I know exactly who you mean. And I think it's just called the Jewish Pro-Life Foundation or something really straightforward like that.
I think you're right.
But when I said there are 2, I mean because of Coalition for Jewish Values. It's not our only cause, but we are most emphatically pro-life. We have a statement about it on our website, both about abortion and about euthanasia, both of which we obviously come out on the side of the Jews were the original pro-life.
Yeah.
That's what I like to say about that topic, because at a time when not only abortion, but infanticide, outright, you look at what the Greeks and the Romans wrote, and outright infanticide was completely above board and acceptable practice, especially if the child born was a girl. And that was something where the Jews were the ones saying, oh no, life is sacred. And every life is sacred. And Jewish, not Jewish, boy, girl, doesn't matter. And this was revolutionary compared to the idolatrous societies in which, if you look at the earlier eras of thousands of years ago, the Jews were this unique force saying, oh no, you just can't do away with a life. I mean, the Romans regarded killing people as a form of entertainment in the Colosseums. Very different society today.
Absolutely.
Thanks to biblical values.
Perfect. All right, so let's keep moving ahead here. When I landed here in New Hampshire about 10 years ago, first time really that I've lived anywhere where there's been much of any Jewish population. New Hampshire's not very big, and so relatively speaking, the Jewish population is probably not real big, but there are Jews here. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then as I move ahead with the radio show, I'm going, why is it that on average, 80% of American Jews vote Democrat. I looked at the trend, and it's true. Obama becomes president, and some 80% voted for him the first time, and then it dropped a tad bit the second go-around, but that man was not terribly pro-Israel and was not a great friend of the Jewish people. But American Jews continued to vote Democrat. People continued doing that. And then they did it with Hillary, and they did it with Biden, and it keeps happening. So my question is, why is it that the American Jewry continue to vote for this party that clearly, as of late, has not been terribly pro-Israel or pro-Judaism?
It's a very common question. It's a very good question. I will be careful to point out that Coalition for Jewish Values, as a 501c3, does not actually endorse candidates for office.
Okay.
And anything I tell you about my personal opinion is just that. But I can also tell you an analysis of the Jewish scene, and that's certainly above board. That's not electioneering. It is true, just basic fact. The Reform movement, which was, I should say, the dominant force in American Judaism for well over 100 years. It got its start in Germany in the 1800s. You know, Germany always works out wonderfully for Jews. That was sarcastic. But in the mid-1800s, when the movement got started, they had a meeting of the Society of Reformers in Frankfurt, and one of their chief determinations was they're looking forward to unlimited development in the religion of Moses. Now, the Bible is not the final word on morality. Rather, progressivism is. Now, if you would have sat down these reformers from the mid-1800s and said, do you know that in 2024, they'll be promoting transgenderism as the new morality? That in fact, you are a bigot if you believe marriage is between a man and a woman. They would look at you like you had rocks in the head or horns on your head. Well, that's a nice Jewish trope for you. You know, something of that nature. But simply put, they adopted progressivism as their religion. A lot of Jews today, I like to point out to Christian friends that if a person leaves Christianity and no longer has Christian values, well, they're not a Christian. If a Jew, because the Jews are a people, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter where you got your ideology from. That person remains a Jew. But a third generation, well, I shouldn't say third generation secular Jew because there are grievously few of them, sadly. But if a family has departed by the second or third generation, their values are not Judaism anymore. They see no reason to marry a Jewish partner, by the way. That's why you don't have that third generation so much.
Right.
Unfortunately, a very sad reality is that you look at most conservative and Reform Jews, imagine that in the 1800s in America, most Jews were Orthodox because all of their own grandparents or great-grandparents, or at most great-great-grandparents, were Orthodox. What they don't realize is in the 1800s, most Jews in America were Reform, well over 80%. And unfortunately, like the largest temple in New York went for their 150th anniversary, wanted to bring the descendants of the founders that they could find to come back and be part of the anniversary. I apologize. I think this was only the 75th anniversary. And they abandoned the plan when they discovered they couldn't find any who were Jewish.
Oh, my.
That is where this comes from. Sadly, the ones that you hear whose values are being driven by progressivism rather than, I will tell you a joke told in the Orthodox Jewish community, which is, what is the difference between Donald Trump and his left-wing Jewish critics? And the answer is Trump has Jewish grandchildren.
Oh my gosh.
You hear that?
Yeah, I hear that.
And by the way, you look at the Orthodox community, the traditional Jews, the ones whose values are driven by Torah and Jewish knowledge and years of study, projections are over 90% support for Trump in the upcoming election, which is the most Trump positive denomination or population segment in the entire country. I mean, that's it. Even the evangelicals are not at that level of support for Trump that you find in the traditional Orthodox. And, there's obvious sociological and everything else reasons behind that, which, again, as a 501c3, I can sit here and analyze for you, even if I'm not telling you who I would vote for or making a recommendation. I can just tell this is why. You look at his policies towards Israel, his policies towards the Jewish community, the outreach that he has done. He actually did 2 separate sessions on anti-Semitism. He talked about it in Bedminster, New Jersey, and then he talked about it in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, they had to cancel it. He was going to do an appearance at a popular deli in very, very ultra-Orthodox Hasidic, in fact, Yiddish-speaking, the Williamsburg neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. And I have a Yiddish language placard, Donald Trump for president, in Yiddish.
Oh my.
So I'm still waiting for the Kamala Harris placard in Yiddish. Not holding a whole candle to that prospect, but it's there,
But here's the thing, to play devil's advocate a tad. Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, is Jewish. I read a couple of articles about this. She is very, very supportive. And he says she has inspired his faith immensely. And he's looking forward to the time that he can place a mezuzah on all the entrances, exits to the White House. But why not Kamala Harris? I mean, she's married to a man, a Jewish man. She loves the Jewish people, according to her and her husband. She's been to Israel with this man a couple of times, blah, blah, blah. So why not Kamala Harris?
The personality, the fact that she married a Jew, that's not necessarily a positive. It doesn't count for a whole lot, especially, Doug Emhoff was married twice. His first wife, no more Jewish than his second. In fact, his daughter from his first marriage is raising money for Gaza, which is to say money that will almost certainly fall into the hands of the Hamas terror organization. That's not a great friend of the Jewish people, to put it mildly. I'm going to say the daughter, obviously. Yeah. Even liberal Jews are very attracted to Jewish learning, Jewish study. They want to do something that's involved. There are any number of non-Jews who are very curious about that and interested and et cetera. You don't see Kamala Harris adopting Jewish observance and converting according to the strictures of Jewish law. That's just not happening. As far as the policies that have been set out, there really is a chasm between what the Biden-Harris administration has pursued and what the Trump administration pursued. And that's the sort of thing that those Jews who really place Israel at the top of their priorities list and anti-Semitism at the top of their priorities list, they're going to care about that. In the middle of a war, nobody told the Americans or the British that they had to be watching out for the humanitarian considerations of the Germans who elected the Nazis to power. Yet somehow, when it comes to Israel in Gaza, it was just announced today that Secretary Blinken said if the Israelis do not improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza, there might be an arms embargo against Israel at a time when Israel is trying to root out an explicitly genocidal terror organization. Hamas is literally the Nazis. Gazans brought the Nazis to power in Gaza. And why do I call them the Nazis? Because the Hamas covenant says that pursuit of Hitler's final solution is their goal. Hitler's final solution was to eradicate all Jews. The Hamas covenant presents a hadith which it claims to trace back to Muhammad, which says that the redemption will not come until the rocks and trees call out to the faithful and say, "Come, faithful Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." That which Hamas very proudly live streamed on October 7th, the brutal murders and rapes and beheadings and all of that against the Jews, it's exactly the final solution. So I'm not exaggerating when I say these are the actual Nazis. And here is Secretary of State Blinken saying that until the Israelis give more funds, which will of course be taken over by Hamas, all those food trucks, everything that they did to bring food, not only were the Israelis bringing more food into Gaza every day, then meaning nothing that they farm on their own is necessary for every single Gazan to eat 3 square meals a day. That is the situation based on how much food is coming in from Israel alone. And yet Blinken is saying, no, you have to do more than that. More than that. They have all the food that they need when it comes to feeding the hostages, yet they don't have the food they need to feed everybody else. Does that make sense?
No, not at all.
They not only do they not have the food they need, they do seem to have all the rockets they need. So where does this all come from? And this idea that Israel needs to be doing more is fundamentally unfair. And you never heard language like that from members of the Trump administration. Again, like I said, I'm not doing an endorsement here. I'm not telling you my own opinion. I'm just telling you some facts about the situation that a lot of people I can observe are making their decisions upon.
Right. So, and that's really what I was looking for here is the facts. Because for me, and I haven't followed this for very long before October 7th. I don't know too much about Israel. I'm Jewish and more Jewish now than I think I'm my entire life. But to me, it's like a no-brainer. And again, I know you're trying to be careful here because of your organization. But
I can give you my own political opinion.
Okay,
That's
good.
not a problem. I'll just, but I'm just saying, so far, everything I've told you is actually compatible with a nonprofit and its IRS regulations in that. But I'm still giving you the whole thing is my personal opinion anyway.
Good.
So if the IRS comes to talk about this conversation, I just say that's my personal opinion. It's
there you go. And we should have put that out there at the very beginning because this is really where I wanted to go with you is for me, again, I haven't been following this very long, just a year. For me, it's a no-brainer in terms of what administration, what leader really is going to help settle down the Middle East because the Middle East is an absolute powder keg right now. And it is very, very scary. And if we don't support Israel, we're next. We know this, right? What is that term? It's the Jews on Saturday and the Christians on Sunday. And we know they're here. We've had 10 million plus coming into this country. So this is very scary. And I'll end here with my little rant is, for me, it's sort of a no-brainer. I don't see that this administration has done much of anything to help settle down the situation other than asking Israel to stop, ceasefire, two-state solution.
There's something actually demonic about a call for ceasefire in the current circumstance. Hamas is not a newcomer to the scene. They've been in charge of Gaza since 2006. Every time there's been a ceasefire, what a ceasefire has meant is Israel will stop shooting, and Hamas will also stop shooting for a time until they've regrouped, rearmed, and they're ready to do it again. Then they will begin a new campaign of terrorism designed to wipe out Israel. That's their modus operandi since 2006. They're still doing it. In 2023, what they did, obviously, was extreme and beyond anything they'd done previously. And Hamas leaders have been completely open about this is what they want to do again. That was merely the dress rehearsal. Their goal is to eradicate. So if you have another ceasefire, it means, once again, the Israelis stop shooting and let Hamas rebuild, regroup, rearm until they can go back and do it again. Israel is not allowed to defeat the genocidal terrorist enemy. And that is as true for Hezbollah as it is in Lebanon, as it is for Hamas in Gaza. The Israelis are not allowed to win. And that's disgraceful. That's actually evil. It's actually barbaric, because you're waiting for a situation in which more Jews will die. And claiming that that is an acceptable and moral place to be. So when you hear somebody calling for a ceasefire, you're listening to a deluded idiot who totally hasn't investigated and recognized who Hamas is, or somebody who actually believes that letting Hamas regroup and rearm is an okay goal. And that's just disgraceful.
We're coming up here pretty quickly to November 5th, Election Day. So just to repeat, it's a no-brainer for me. I've seen what's been going on the last 4 years. I saw what was going on the previous 4 years. It is like night and day relative to this particular issue we're talking about, right? Anti-Semitism.
I would call it day and night, meaning the first 4 years were a lot better than the current 4 years.
Absolutely. Okay, Rabbi Menken, I want to thank you again so much for joining me, and I want to begin wrapping up. I think it's important for people to really step back for a moment and think about their vote before November 4th and the importance of that vote relative to what remains of us. We're only, 16 million people. The Jewish people are some 16 million people. I think the population of Israel is 9 million people. And 1,200 people, I think some folks would say, what the heck, 1,200 people? Yeah, there's still 101 hostages. But where does that stand for me? Oh, I don't know. Maybe there's more important things on my plate right now, even if I'm Jewish. So what would you say to American people, prior to the election, to really think about their vote? I mean, what's most important? I don't know. Is it abortion? Maybe abortion's number one over the future of the Jewish people and Israel. And maybe that's just it for them. But what message would you deliver?
Well, the first thing you need to understand is that anti-Semitism, precisely because it is a subtle form of bigotry, is tremendously dangerous. Look at what happened in Germany. People were deluded. People thought that Hitler wasn't all that bad, et cetera, et cetera. And also his hatred about Jews had nothing to do with the old Christian approach of the Jews killed our God and despising people because of their religion. We can't do that anymore. Not only do Catholics and Protestants have to get along, but they both have to get along with Jews. And so that's not the source. No, it's about their inferior ethnicity. This is something totally new and different. Underneath the surface, everything went right back to the classic Jewish tropes about Jewish theft and Jews being a hostile force and all of that. But it existed behind a new facade, and people were duped. That's how it worked in Germany. You go look at the current situation, it is no longer acceptable to be an anti-Semite. To be called a Nazi is one of the worst epithets. But if you claim that it's about Israel, all of a sudden it's totally acceptable. In fact, I was shown a clip of a member of a board in Teaneck. There was a student group that presented a National Keffiyeh Day poster that showed keffiyeh material, this headcloth that Arafat used to wear. It's a symbol of terrorism. But this particular keffiyeh pattern was overlaid over the shape of the map of Israel. It was to declare, we want to eradicate the Jews of Israel. We want to replace it with an Arab state, which is the whole point of the PLO from the beginning, etc. And the member of the school board said, but that's not hateful. It's a poster about a keffiyeh, and you're seeing something in it that's not there, and you, the Jewish questioner, need to check your own bias. That's what the board member said. It was absolutely disgraceful, absolutely racist, patently anti-Semitic. You don't see people calling for the eradication of a country in any other case except Israel. Nobody wants to eradicate North Korea. Nobody wants to eradicate Cuba. The only people who want to eradicate, they want to eradicate Israel or the United States. And that's because the United States is right now, the foremost voice for tolerance and decency in the world.
Right.
And so all the people who favor intolerance and barbarism want to destroy the United States right after they destroy the little Satan, namely Israel.
That's right.
And all this is where all the lies about Israel, this is where it all stems from, this idea that Jews are stealing. Oh, they're stealing their own homeland. All this stuff is classic. It's got nothing to do with Jews. The fact that you have students on campuses across America, especially in the formerly elite universities. I say formerly, advisedly, because I would never want to talk to a Harvard class of 24 graduate. I mean, no, please, thank you, go away. Anti-Semitism is so subtle, and because it is so subtle, it poses an existential threat to the United States. This bigotry. The Jews have a promise of survival. America does not. For America to remain the shining city on the hill requires that people deal with the danger posed by barbarians marching on college campuses across the country, calling for massacre of Jews just because of who they are, while they demonize anybody else who holds to traditional values. That is really one of the biggest issues. A few days ago, someone in the Jewish community just pointed out to me, says, there were a lot of Jews who voted for Hitler. And Trump has these fascist tendencies and blah, 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 and therefore you should be voting for Trump's opponent. And I said, it's interesting you point that out, because obviously the reason why certain Jews voted for Hitler is they considered certain other issues to be more important than Hitler's anti-Semitism. The German economy was in a shambles. Its international standing was at a low ebb, and Hitler was promising to rebuild all of these things, and these very patriotic German Jews said, we should support Hitler, even though he seems to have this bigotry against Jews, it'll be okay. There's more important issues. Well, the Jewish Democratic Council of America, which has been trying to gaslight the Jewish community for months now about the fall in Jewish support for Harris, of Jews defecting to go Shabbos Kestenbaum and Bill Ackman and Alan Dershowitz, these people falling over to the dark side, going over to supporting Trump, as if that's not a thing. That's not a demographic. It blatantly is. And it's because Jews are waking up to the danger that they face. The JDCA, in their claim that Jews are not defecting, they did a survey of their own where obviously they had certain bias in their methods. And one of the things they did was they asked questions of people who literally placed issues like saving democracy and the abortion issue, access to abortion as if that were a Jewish value, ahead of Israel and anti-Semitism on their priorities list. There were certain Jews in Hitler's era who placed other issues ahead of anti-Semitism on their priorities list. And those were the Jews who voted for Hitler. Well, guess what? Those are the Jews who are continuing to vote for the Democratic candidate in this particular survey. The Jews who prioritize Israel and anti-Semitism, and the more they prioritize Israel and anti-Semitism, that is why you end up with a traditional Orthodox community over 90% behind Trump. If you want to look at the model, which Jews are making a mistake and which Jews have it right, indeed, Germany is a great place to look, and it should be advising your vote right now. That is how I would take it.
That is perfect. That is a fabulous way to wrap up this podcast. And I will say, and anecdotally, let's get that word correctly, I have a neighbor who I just met not long ago, who's will vote for Trump's opponent because Trump is going to outlaw in vitro fertilization. And she's Jewish, by the way.
Which is not true.
But she's Jewish. She's Jewish.
I got it.
So perfect example. And so
Right. And the IVF is more important than averting another Holocaust. I think it's like,
just saying. So thank you for that. I think that is a fabulous, thought-provoking message to end our podcast with. Absolutely perfect.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hey, very good.
Check us out on coalitionforjewishvalues.org, which is the short way is cjvalues.org. We are CJ Values on your favorite social media. And I am Y. Menken and look forward to hearing from people.
Perfect. And we'll have all your information on our website at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com. And they can look you up there and also our social media as well. So, Rabbi Menken, thank you so much again for this. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks again for having me.
All right. You take care.
All right, so there you have it. I hope that y'all enjoyed that chat with Rabbi Menken and learned a few things as well. I know that I did. I also want to thank Rabbi Menken so much for joining me today, as it's obvious from his bio that he is a very busy man, and I am just so grateful that he took the time to chat with me. Now, here is my quick take about this chat. First, I want to reiterate the fact that Rabbi Menken was very transparent and made it very clear that he was speaking about the topics of the Middle East and our upcoming 2024 election in his personal capacity and not in his role with the organization, the Coalition for Jewish Values, which I personally understand and respect. I also want to tell y'all that the reason I honed in on an Orthodox rabbi is that I wanted to hear from a rabbi that would speak to us about these issues from a more biblically based, historical, and factual perspective. And in my opinion, Rabbi Menken did just that. I did not want to hear from a rabbi who would spin this discussion into a political or social activist narrative. And I felt that an Orthodox rabbi who could and would actually talk to me would not do so. And I believe, again, that Rabbi Menken did do that for us. And finally, as an Orthodox rabbi, Rabbi Menken, in my humble opinion, cannot be disparaged in terms of his knowledge of Judaism, which is evident in his work for decades relative to Jewish outreach, Jewish education, and Jewish thought. Now, with all of this in mind, I just have to say that the facts that Rabbi Menken shared surrounding this horrific war in the Middle East and relative to how the current administration has dealt with it are just that, facts, and cannot be disputed. And if you question these facts, I would suggest that you go research them for yourself. In other words, go fact check them for yourself, which, by the way, I highly suggest that we all do with most everything that we hear and see these days. Now for my 2 cents. First, I have to say, there was a lot of information that Rabbi Menken shared with us for those few minutes. For me, as a more common sense kind of gal, Rabbi Menken actually confirmed my thoughts and opinion about what's happening in the Middle East, and my opinion for months now that for American Jews, the choice in this election, again, in my humble opinion, should be a no-brainer. And the reason for this is exactly what I've been saying for months now. And that is that if a person claims to have such pride in being an American Jew, which I am not, by the way. Yeah, you heard it. I said not. And what I mean by that is that instead I am a very proud Jewish American, no different than Americans who take pride in being an African American, an Asian American, a Hispanic American, an Indian American, an Irish American, and the list goes on and on. I am a very proud Jewish American.
Anyway, how is it that any proud American Jew or Jewish American does not prioritize the future of the Jewish people in America, in Israel, and across the planet? And by the way, Israel, the one and only Jewish state, before any other issue, period. How can we not prioritize that as our number one issue? Not our only issue, but our number one issue. To repeat, how is it that an American Jew can prioritize abortion, transgenderism, or a host of other issues, including their absolute hate of Donald Trump over the survival of the Jewish people? The survival of the Jewish people in America and across the planet. And most importantly, again in my humble opinion, how is it that an American Jew can prioritize anything above the only Jewish state of Israel? How is that possible? Now, I know I'm going a bit long here, so let's continue this line of logic. Let's say that I have now convinced you that you want to prioritize the survival of Israel and, by association, the survival of the Jewish people across the planet above anything else. How do you determine who you're going to vote for on November 5th? Well, I don't know about y'all, but I've watched, listened, and followed to the best of my ability what this administration has done and not done over the last year. I also have some basic understanding of what President Trump did for Israel and, by association, for the Jewish people across the world during his tenure as president. And I have to say that if you step back, as I really often try to do, and tune out all of the noise and compare the work that these two administrations have done in support of Israel and of the Jewish people at a 30,000-foot level, who gets my vote is a no-brainer. I won't go into it here, and Rabbi Menken didn't either, but I will include a list of all the pro-Israel actions taken by the Trump administration with this podcast for your viewing pleasure. But generally speaking, it is very clear that this administration has proved that they are not a friend to Israel. And honestly, they are not a friend to the American Jews. Because if you listen closely to the facts presented by Rabbi Menken about the current administration's actions since October 7th, this statement is undeniable. A few facts that Rabbi Menken didn't mention follow. First, early in the war, the House of Representatives authorized the sale, did you hear me say sale, of defense weapons to Israel, but have since then, to this very day, slowed down the delivery of the defense weapons, sometimes to a stop. Why is that? Second, back in around March of this year, the Biden administration sanctioned Israeli citizens who live in Judea and Samaria, or as many people call it, the West Bank. Sanctions actually mean freezing their bank accounts. This administration froze the bank accounts of Israeli citizens based on false accusations that they were committing terrorism acts, which, by the way, as I just said, was a lie, because what these Israeli citizens were doing were defending themselves against the PLO terrorists that run rampant in Judea and Samaria. Just like the lie that Israel killed thousands of people at the Shiva hospital months ago, or the lie that 30,000 Gazan children are dead. Third, back in April, the Biden administration sanctioned an IDF unit of Orthodox religious soldiers. You can look that up. And lastly, but most importantly, is the fact, which Rabbi Menken confirmed, that this administration began calling for a ceasefire within 1 week of October 7th, within just 1 week. And in my opinion, this is evil and despicable because, as Rabbi Menken said, if Israel stops without eliminating as many of these barbarians as possible, it's just a matter of time before they do it again. Not only to the Jews, by the way,
But they will continue this reign of terror until every Jew, Christian, Buddhist, gay, straight, non-believer is dead. And as the saying goes, they will come for the Jews on Saturday and the Christians on Sunday. Oh, and one other issue that every Jew should concern themselves with, and that is the rampant Nazi-like Jew hatred that is permeating not only our universities, but our nation and much of the Western world. Where has this administration been on that? Basically, silent. So I ask, how is it that an American Jew or a Jewish American can continue to support an administration who has taken countless actions to stop Israel from defending itself against an existential threat, an ongoing genocide to exterminate every living Jew in Israel and across the planet? In my humble opinion, the American Jewish vote should be a no-brainer. And that's a wrap. Thank you all for joining me today on A Journey to Milk and Honey. Before you go, don't forget that you can stay connected with us on social media, as we're on all major platforms at JMH Podcast, and we would love to hear from you. You can also find us on YouTube at JMH Podcast or A Journey to Milk and Honey. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, as it really helps out our channel. And wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure to follow us there to stay updated on new episodes and to keep your journey going. If you're looking for more, you can visit us online at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com or jmhpodcast.com. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to leave a review or comment, as your feedback helps the podcast to grow and improve, and we truly value your support. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and shalom.